The National Weather Service.
I like coming down to the stream and working with students like this, giving them the fundamentals of the scientific method, and the seeds that are planted through the programming available from Alaska Public Media helps to prepare those young minds. Inclusion of Alaska Public Media in my will is a cornerstone of my legacy. My name is Doug Molyneux, and I'm a proud supporter of Alaska Public Media.
Said you'd favor middle-class tax cuts.
Just up here, that's what
She took me out to those wetlands.
I think we're off to a great start.
Hello and welcome to the Monday night edition of Alaska Weather. I'm meteorologist Kimberley Hoeppner, and today is May 1st, 2017. So to start off the month, we're going to take a look at your river map across the state. And across this northern tier of the state, we are still all in white, which means these rivers to the north are all still ice covered. However, at 1 p.m. Alaska Daylight Savings Time this afternoon, we did have the tripod on the Dehne go out today, so that's new information. It means that we're getting some warming and some opening of the rivers across the southern tier of the state. The areas that are open are in dark blue, with mostly open in this color here in the darker shade of blue, and the lightest shade of blue here is somewhat open. So the rivers are on their way, breaking up slowly across the area, and the River Watch, at the River Forecast Center there in Anchorage, we've sent some people out to the Kuskokwim River area, and they are going to be doing some flyovers. So we'll keep you updated in the upcoming days. Now, just taking a quick look at the eastern areas of the state, we do have the fire danger map up today because we are going to see some gustier winds with a southerly flow through the Alaska Range. So the Tanana Flats and south are going to see some drier conditions through your Tuesday afternoon. Of course, slight improvement overnight with the cooler temperatures. However, look for Tuesday being a higher fire weather danger across this area, as we have some lower relative humidities dropping down to the lower 20% range with the diurnal heating, and also the gustier winds are going to be up to 40 miles per hour. Now let's move on to the current satellite view, and we do have quite a bit of clouds across the area. This is the basic low pressure system that's been across the area for days, very broad at this point, spanning from the central areas of the Bering all the way across to the eastern areas of the Gulf of Alaska. I'll put this into motion one more time, and you can see that there's a deep subtropical moisture plume that's moving up into the central areas of the Gulf and into the southeastern areas of the state. Now, looking at the western areas of the Bering, mainly quiet conditions, as we do have a ridge pattern that's just transversing the central areas of the Aleutians, so a little bit more of a northerly flow out towards the west. And we do have quite a few broken clouds along much of the Bering today, with some broken clouds also across the central interior and north. However, afternoon showers have developed, and we're seeing a little bit more cloud cover there. Now, across the northern tier of the state, the north slope down through the Brooks Range have seen some foggy conditions with some improvement during the afternoon hours. You can see that clearing out along the Brooks Range there and across parts of the northwest. Now, looking at your map from today, here's the low pressure system as the stack system, the upper level down to the surface. Low pressure has weakened down to 996 millibars with a weak trough across the central interior and also along the areas of the southern Gulf and Kodiak Island, brings some afternoon shower activity across the trough, across both troughs north and to the south, with some light shower activity on the backside of this low pressure system. Now, the weak boundary ahead of this is primarily rain being generated across an upper level wave that's lifting north later this afternoon. And for tonight, we're going to mainly see just showers ahead of the next low pressure system that's going to be quickly making its way to the north. Now, across the southern tier of the state, mainly showery regime for tonight, with drier across the central interior to the Brooks Range, and then north of the Brooks Range, a bit colder, so we're going to see some snow showers from Dead Horse on over to the northwest coast. Also expect fog reducing visibilities below 1 mile or lesser times, but however, they're not going to see any snow accumulation. Rain for the overnight hours, probably just a trace to 1/10 of an inch possible across the southern tier of the state, with some patchy fog development across the eastern areas of the Bering overnight. The ridge across the western areas of the Bering will be replaced with low pressure moving across the far west during the afternoon tomorrow. And the system that you're going to want to watch is this low pressure that's going to be heading up into the Gulf of Alaska tomorrow. Deepening very fast to a 970 millibar low. This is going to be bring a large swath of rain across the Gulf waters and into the southeast. So expect some heavy rainfall across the panhandle areas, with winds increasing between 40 to 50 knots across the marines of all of the Gulf. And then along the coastal locations, also expect those winds to be gusting between 40 to 50 knots, with possible stronger gusts through channel terrain, especially the east to west gaps across the southeast there. Now, in addition to the rain for the Marines, expect to see some high seas going up to 20 feet, and we'll get to that in your marine forecast. Across the interior locations for Tuesday, expect primarily afternoon diurnal showers. Weak wave moving through tonight will dry out behind the system tomorrow. Across the northern tier of the state, we'll see some fairly dense fog in the morning hours, again across the Brooks Range, and then improving through the day with some shower activity lingering along that northwest coast, north to northwest coast. On Wednesday, the system across the Gulf is going to be weakening across the southeast. However, showers are going to continue and winds will be gusting between 20 to 35 knots. Now, the low pressure system will bring some moisture all the way through to the interior, so expect to see rainfall all for these areas. Rainfall amounts across the coastal areas from the southeast on over towards the eastern Kenai will range between 1 to 3 inches, with between 1/10 of an inch to a 1/2 an inch of rain for interior areas. Across the western areas of the state, primarily showery conditions with northerly flow on the backside of this low pressure system. With the Bering, the ridge is going to be transversing, bring some fog areas in the morning and afternoons across that eastern Bering, and primarily showers just out to the west. Now, the temperatures across the state today varied, with the warmest temperatures across the interior getting up to 61 degrees across the interior areas of the state, but primarily in the mid-50s. Across the southeast, they were a little bit cooler with the cloudy conditions, staying around mid-40s to lower 50s across the Kenai. Now to the northern tier of the state, still very chilly up there. 10 to 15 degrees, mainly north of the Brooks Range. A little bit of a warmer trend across the Seward Peninsula in the mid-30s, and the southwest today was fairly warm, with several temperatures from Sparivon and Sleep Mew around 57 degrees during the afternoon hours. Now, the Bristol Bay was in the upper 30s to lower 40s, with a rain and low pressure system across the area, and same across the western Bering in the upper 30s to lower 40s. Temperatures for your overnight will be around the mid-30s for all the coastal locations of the Gulf and the Bering. A little bit mild across the southeast as well, just near 40 or below. Across the central interior, dropping down to just below freezing. In the northern tier of the state, nearly steady conditions in the 10 to 15 degree range, possibly slightly colder just to the north there of AKwx. Now, for your high temperatures tomorrow, expect a very persistent pattern with temperatures in the mid-50s to near 60 for much of the interior. The coastal locations will get up to right around 50 degrees, slightly cooler, where the rain comes in sooner. And the northern tier of the state, a little bit warmer that day in the lower 20s. Now, temperatures will be much of the same across the Bering as well, and the Alaska Peninsula in the mid-40s. taking a look at your flying weather, we're going to see widespread IFR conditions across the northern coast down to the Bering due to the fog conditions that develop, and then we'll see widespread MVFR conditions in these locations as well, and a little bit of cloud conditions there in the interior, patchy fog also along some of the coastal areas with low pressure lingering across the Gulf of Alaska. Taking a look at your afternoon, we'll see some improvement across the interior. However, areas of the Gulf and across the Bering will be continued MVFR and widespread IFR conditions. Taking a look at your passes in more depth, you'll see Anatuvik Pass going from MVFR to VFR late day, as well as Adigan. And we'll see Lake Clark and Merrill Pass go MVFR to VFR late day. And we'll see the same thing also at Rainy Pass. Windy Pass will also be MVFR to start your day, going to VFR. And we'll see Isabel, VFR, VFR at Mentasta. Also, Tanita will go MVFR to VFR. And Portage will stay IFR and then go to MVFR late day. Chilkoot and White Pass should mainly be MVFR, possibly some breaks to VFR. Now the freezing levels tomorrow in the morning will be draped across the central areas of the Bering and back over towards the north central areas of the state and then along the coast. Looking at primarily a 2,000-foot freezing level just off the surface with the higher heights just to the south of the Gulf. Looking at your icing tomorrow, the primary concerns are going to be some light icing across the Gulf and just north of the Brooks Range. Looking at the jet stream, fairly amplified pattern in comparison to yesterday, as this low pressure system just kind of sits along and speeds just across the southern areas of the Gulf. Now at the 9,000-foot level, here's the low pressure system that moves tomorrow. At the 9,000-foot level, we're going to have quite strong speeds between 40 to 50 knots with a change of direction around the low pressure system in the Gulf. Fairly light pattern across the interior areas and north areas of the state at 10 knots. And then across the Bering, look for light flow there, change of direction around the ridging that's transversing the central areas of the Aleutians. Look for a little bit tighter speeds there across the Alaska Peninsula out of the north, and a little bit stronger at 3,000 with that approaching low pressure system from the North Pacific. Now the low pressure system here at 3,000 feet will vary between 50 to 70 knots, and we're looking at mainly a speed share as this system is well stacked. Across the northern tier of the state, the flow will be relatively light from the central interior to the north slope. Looking at your turbulence, just to sum all of this up, your concerns are going to be mainly across the Gulf Coast locations and all of the Gulf, with moderate to severe locations across the southern tier of the Gulf and also across the Panhandle for your day tomorrow. So looking at the western areas of the state, fairly benign conditions, and towards the north, out to the west, a little bit of a speed max in between the ridging on its east and west. Now in just a moment, we'll be back with your marine forecast.
Dave Snider. As you well know, you can get forecast information for any day of the week. Today, tonight, tomorrow, out to 6 or 7 days. It includes the high and low temperature, the wind direction, the chance of rain or snow in your part of Alaska. But did you know that there is information available to forecast out to 2 weeks? So the question is, how would you use that information? And here to answer that question today and tell us a lot more about climate services from the U.S. National Weather Service Alaska region is Rick Thoman. He's the program manager for the Climate Science and Services. And Rick, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Dave.
How would we use information that is out to 2 weeks instead of just the high and low and the chance of rain?
Well, Dave, as we move out in time, of course, forecasts become more uncertain. So as we move into that second week from now, we're not looking at specific highs or lows or precipitation amounts at any given place. What we can do with the state of the science at this point is get a handle on patterns. So we can say things like increased chances for stormy weather in the Bering Sea in 2 weeks, or we've been in a cold weather pattern, looks like 8 to 10 days from now, that pattern's going to change. Those are the kind of forecasts that we can currently make in that second week.
So you're increasing lead time for perhaps big or small weather events and telling us the likelihood of maybe more coastal storms or wind events in some areas?
Those are the kinds of things that that we hope to be able to let Alaskans know in the second week forecast. And if you have an activity or an event that you would find that kind of advance notice useful, whether it's moving stuff off of the beach, whether to go out hunting or to come back from camp, those kind of decisions, the week 2 provides the opportunity for you to get a handle on that kind of information.
Okay. What other type of weather impacts that we're familiar with might Alaskans use climate services for?
Well, in the forecast realm, we can go provide some information from this week 2, say the 8 to 14 day period, on out to the monthly and even seasonal time scale. Now, those monthly seasonal forecasts are still kind of just really very much pattern dependent, and the amount of detail that we can provide at this point is still pretty limited. Generally, indications of how temperature and precipitation will fall in maybe above normal, below normal kind of range. But in the week 2 period, we can be considerably more specific than that as far as the general patterns and really the impacts on Alaskans.
Okay, so we would be talking about generalizations there that would tell us that the period might be more stormy, might be more hot, more dry, more cold, and situations like that.
That's correct. So we're not going to be able to say in which community, for instance, there's the threat of coastal flooding, but we can often be able to tell we're moving into a pattern that would be conducive to big Bering Sea storms. So if you're in an area that could potentially impact you, you'll want to pay attention to the weather forecast.
Okay. Now, every day and every hour of the day, the National Weather Service is working on a forecast for the next day. But how do you start your forecast process for that extended period that goes out beyond 7 days?
Well, the way things work right now, we start off with the expected general flow pattern for Alaska and the whole world, really, and then we narrow that down to Alaska. So we start off with the basic computer model forecast. There's quite a few different computer models that we look at, bring those together. And then another important part of that is we attempt to assess the confidence. The reality is often 2 weeks away, the computer models are very divergent. They have lots of different solutions, and that's an indication that we don't have much confidence. But when we see more agreement in that time frame, and when that agreement is a pattern that will be potentially very impactful for Alaska or is a big change from what we've been in, that's when we can then take that expected pattern. We have computer models forecasting it. We've assessed the confidence. Now we can move that forward. How, using our experience as Alaskan weather forecasters, how does that typically play out for Alaska? So is this a stormy pattern for the Bering Sea? Is this an extra rainy period for Southeast? Is this the kind of pattern that generates strong winds potentially in the Anchorage Bowl? Is this a deep cold pattern for the interior? All of those are the kind of things that we're looking at in these large-scale patterns. That's very different than telling you that the winds on 10 days from now are going to be gusting to 120 on the hillside. We're looking for patterns, not the very specific information that the Weather Service will then hone in on as the event gets closer.
So the idea is to keep the 5, 6, 7 day forecast the same, where you are getting the standard high and low temperature and the chance of wind or rain, but further out you get a broad general forecast, but as the time gets closer to that event, we'll get a lot more specific.
That's correct.
Okay, very good. So how can people use this information if I am out in the bush and I want to see, is a coastal storm expected in my region, or is a chance for that improving over the next 2 to 3 weeks? Where could I go to get information like that?
When we see that potentially impactful or a big change in the weather is coming 8 to 14 days out, typically we will start to highlight that on the Weather Service Facebook site. We might produce a YouTube video highlighting that, linking that on our Facebook site. So often at this point, we don't have much to say in that, because we're really looking for those forecasts of opportunities. But one thing we can say very likely as we go through the next 2 or 3 years, there'll be more and more of this kind of forecast information available in that week 2 time frame.
Okay, and something that emergency managers and city planners and folks in villages might be interested in keeping an eye out for, looking for that information to be headlined, whether that's on social media or perhaps through the National Weather Service channels there to get information from you to make better plans a little bit longer term and make better preparations in the event that things become a little bit more unsettled.
Absolutely. Climate Services with the National Weather Service Alaska region is talking to the state of Alaska every week, apprising them of that 2-week outlook. And on the social media side, we are working to keep Alaskans informed so that when we think we have some confidence in a high impact or a big change, that's the best way right now for folks to find out about that. Twitter, Facebook, so stay tuned to your National Weather Service.
Very good, a developing program. Rick Thoman with the National Weather Service Alaska region. He's a Climate Science and Services Program Manager. Thanks so much for joining us again, Rick, and I hope to have you back again soon.
Great, thanks, Dave.
For another edition of Alaska Weather Facts, I'm meteorologist Dave Snider. We'll see you next time.
Hello and welcome back to the program. Let's take a look at the ice across the Bering and to the north. The Bering Strait here, you can see that we're still starting to see some breaks in the ice edge, and we're seeing eroding all across the northern tier of the Bering. We're seeing lighter ice along the west coast with the warming that has occurred over the last week and the mild temperatures overnight. We should see the ice edge continuing to recede. So be on the look for this ice edge starting to wear away with the warmer temperatures that we've been having. Now let's take a look at the storm system that's going to be impacting the southeast tomorrow. Primarily, we'll see the southern tier with the gales picking up by late morning out of the southeast. Look for max gale strength winds there with higher gusts as we head into the afternoon. The inside channels will stay a little bit lighter through the day tomorrow, possibly some higher gusts as that low starts to lift to the north with a northerly flow across the inner channels. However, as we head through your Wednesday forecast, expect those winds to be affecting those inside channels with the seas on this day 4 to 6 feet and an increase in seas on your day for Wednesday between 17 to 24 feet out there across the outer waters, and expect those higher gusts and also a widespread area of gales for those outer waters. Looking at the south central conditions, by late morning you're going to see an increase in the wind speeds, and it's primarily going to be from the north to northeast direction across the Cook Inlet and across the Gulf east to northeast. Prince William Sound will see seas between 4 to 6 feet as well as the northern inlet, and then we'll see seas around 7 feet across the Cook Inlet and further to the south across Shelikof 10 feet. Higher seas across the Gulf between 13 to 14 feet with higher seas on your Wednesday. And then we'll also see that northerly flow continuing across the Cook Inlet to Shelikof Strait. Gales, winds are going to be primarily confined to the northern Gulf on Wednesday. Seas on that day will also be between 13 to 18 feet across the marine waters. Looking at your Tuesday forecast for the Alaska Peninsula, primarily a northerly flow with small craft along the eastern and south side of the Alaska Peninsula. Seas on this day will be 3 to 8 feet. Higher seas across the Pacific side. On your Wednesday, the winds will change direction and become more northwesterly. Small crafts across the entire area. For the Aleutian chain, looking at a northerly flow across the eastern and central areas of the Aleutians, becoming south as you head further west with that next low pressure system coming up, and primarily a small craft advisory across the entire area on Tuesday, and then lighter wind speeds across the central and eastern areas on Wednesday. A little bit more change of a direction out of the southerly direction for the west and central areas, small crafts on either side of the ridging there, with a northerly flow across the eastern Aleutians, higher gusts possible along that eastern side there. Looking at your western areas of the state, primarily a northerly flow for tomorrow, and we'll see small crafts out there towards the Pribilof Islands. Seas on that day will be between 4 to 7 feet. And then we'll see your Wednesday forecast increase in winds with small crafts towards the Nunavak Island and south locations. And then for your north and western tier of the state, winds primarily on this day are going to be east to north and 15 to 20 knots, still ice covered. And on your Wednesday forecast, expect a little bit change of a direction. Northeasterly towards the Kotzebue Sound will become more northwesterly. Now let's sum up your forecast again. We're going to look at this low pressure system primarily as the main weather impacts as we head into your forecast for tomorrow. We do have some snow across the northern tier of the state with some fog. However, this low pressure system, like I said, is the main focus. It's going to bring wind speeds between 40 to 50 knots across the waters. The gusts are going to be slightly higher, possibly through east to west channel terrain in the panhandle, and we'll also see some very heavy rain across the low pressure system, ranging for the coastal areas between 1 to 3 inches and 1/10 to up to a half an inch of rain as we head into the day on Wednesday. For the western areas of the state, primarily fog across the eastern areas of the Bering with showers across the southwest, and then the low pressure system will be traversing across the western part of the Aleutians. And on your Wednesday forecast, we'll see that rain spreading towards the interior locations, and then we'll see some very gusty winds continuing just for the northern and western areas of the Gulf on this day, and the winds across the southeast will be tapering down. Thanks for staying with us tonight. We'll see you back here tomorrow.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.